Hi, I'm Jim McIntyre, the Regional Communications Director for the American Red Cross of Northern Ohio. And today we're going to talk about our mental health volunteers, what they do, how they help during disasters, big and small, and how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we deliver our mission
Mhm.
to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. Not what we do, but how we do it in many instances. Adrienne Kapr-Ford is a disaster mental health supervisor for the Red Cross of Northern Ohio and is our guest today. Hi, Adrienne.
Hi, good morning.
What do disaster mental health workers for the American Red Cross do?
Well, actually, I'm going to start out by just kind of talking just for a minute about the mission of the Red Cross. And so I'm actually going to read it because they say it probably better than I do. So, the mission of the Red Cross as a whole is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. And so, disaster mental health is one branch that assists in alleviating human suffering. And we also have our own mission statement that we follow. So, the mission statement of disaster mental health in the Red Cross actually is to respond to the psychosocial needs of people affected by a disaster, including Red Cross disaster workers, also across the continuum of disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And so, specifically, what I do, mental health in the Red Cross does, is we respond to immediate emotional distress of people that have experienced any kind of a disaster, whether it be a local disaster, a home fire. In this area, we've had plane crashes. Unfortunately, we've had people that have drowned. Um, a variety of disasters. And also, we respond to national disasters, which often people hear about then in the news, whether it's wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, any of those big natural national disasters. We also respond to those as well. And so part of that is providing immediate emotional assistance to them. And our goal is actually to mitigate, we say, or balance out long term consequences. So, what we've found is that if we can respond quickly, we can help assist so that that trauma doesn't go long term. It doesn't turn into PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. Like, there are things we can do right away to kind of help balance that out so people don't suffer long term consequences then related to that trauma, that disaster.
Well, before we get into those things that you can and do to help these the people who have experienced disasters, let's first talk about the role itself. What qualifies you and other disaster mental health workers to do this job?
So, in the Red Cross, to do disaster mental health, you have to be licensed. You have to actively be a licensed either social worker or clinical therapist. You can also be a psychologist, a psychiatrist. We've had licensed school counselors as well, but you have to have your own independent licensure that is active in order to provide mental health services to people.
And how does a mental health, a qualified licensed mental health worker, um, become a volunteer for the Red Cross?
Well, first you hear about it, and that's what happened to me.
How did you
um,
hear about it?
so I actually was at a professional conference here in Ohio. I yearly attend the All Ohio Counselor Conference, and I was at the conference. One of the workshops was about the Red Cross responding and doing mental health. And I thought, well, isn't that an interesting thing? I'd never heard of it. And like a lot of people, I'm like, the Red Cross does that? Like, huh, you don't just give blood to the Red Cross. Like, what else do they do? So I went to the workshop, and wow, was I amazed to hear what what broad spectrum of services they provided. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, when I retire, maybe that's something I can get a little more active in. My job was demanding, I had a family, so there wasn't a lot of time then. But I thought when I retire, I'll remember this. So I retired in 2014, and I, in fact, did remember. So called my local chapter right here in the Akron area and said, okay, do you need some volunteers? To which, of course, they said, oh, always.
Yeah.
Come on in. Let's talk. Let's see. We have so many things that people can help us with.
I always say the need for volunteers is just like the need for blood. It's constant.
Yes, it is
Because,
constant. That's
yeah.
exactly right.
And there are other volunteers who do other things, especially in terms of disaster response. People who simply get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning in order to help a family that's just been burned out of their homes by providing them with immediate financial assistance, sometimes blankets, comfort kits that include hygiene items in case they have to go stay in a hotel, that kind of thing. You come after that a little bit after. Well, tell me how the process works. Where do you come in the disaster response cycle?
Okay. Before I answer that, though, I do want to tell you I started out as a DAT worker. We call them a disaster action team member, which
Oh,
are those people that, yep, at 2 o'clock in the morning here in Northeast Ohio, with it snowing like crazy, I got phone calls saying, there's been a fire, Adrienne, can you respond? You're on the list on call, this week or this day. And of course I said, yes, I sure can. Give me a couple minutes. I'm hurrying, to get there. So I have nothing but respect for people that do that. It is incredible what they do day and night for us, for people. So it's incredible. So a shout out to them.
just curious, did you employ the knowledge that you have as a licensed counselor when you went to those calls?
Well, I did, yes, but DAT workers, there's a lot that they have to do in a short period of time.
All right.
So I pretty much, did all the required things that I needed to. But then, yes, because you always go out usually in pairs of two or even more. So then, yes, oftentimes after I got the information I needed, the other worker I was with would continue, and then I would have an opportunity to then say to that person, hey, can you and I maybe scooch over here and can we just talk a little bit? And how are you doing? Oh my gosh, and let them begin to, tell me what happened. And so, yeah, I definitely employed some of my skills at the time.
Was that a choice of yours to start as a disaster action team member to respond to disasters in that way?
It was actually, it was. It was a good way to kind of learn, what the Red Cross does, how immediate the response is. And then from there, I learned a little bit more that, in fact, there was a mental health team also out of actually kind of the Cleveland, Akron area. And pretty quickly, then I moved into that, but I did both for a while. Both DAT and then mental health. And then I eventually just moved into doing mental health for the Red Cross. So I'm no longer a DAT team member.
I know that on average, every 24 hours, we respond to a home fire more than 3 times. It's slightly over 3 home fires on average every 24 hours. I suppose that's the majority of the work that you do is with people who have experienced a home fire.
Yes. And so locally, I am on the disaster mental health team here in the Northern Ohio region. We actually cover 33 counties, and there is a team of us, and we sign up. We take turns. So a shift is 1 week, and so those 7 days you're on call. We call it for 24 hours. So it's 24/7 for 1 week. And we have what's called the primary mental health responder, We also now have a secondary every week mental health responder because, as you said, sometimes there are so many there's so many needs, there's so many fires, or the fire is a large, maybe apartment complex, and there are so many needs that just one mental health person couldn't handle it. So we have a secondary just in case. So locally, I usually take a shift once every 6 weeks. Our team, I'm happy to say, has gotten larger. At one point, each of us was on for 1 week every month. But as the team's gotten a little bit bigger now, it's more once every 6 weeks or so that I'm on call. And actually, I was on call last week, and I had 9 clients last week that I assisted. And so when you're doing local response, it's all phone calls. In the past, though, I would have to say I have met with people. If the need was for me to meet with people, I have met with people like in hotels or in the backyard of their aunt's house where they're living. So I've done that. And we also have something in disaster mental health called an ICCT team, which is integrated condolence care team, which means when there has been a fatality, when someone has passed away as a result of, and it's usually a fire. Although, like I said, we've responded to plane crashes or people having drowned. We set up a team then that has a mental health individual. We also have health services, which is one of our nurses. And we go out then as a team. Sometimes a caseworker will go with us as well. And those are always meetings in person. So we'll send a team when the family's ready to have someone come talk to them and see how we can assist them and what services we can provide for them.
Has this pandemic changed the way you and your team are operating and are helping people?
Yes, unfortunately. So locally, we always would respond initially with a phone call. But like I said, I have absolutely also gone out and talked with people. Because of the pandemic, we pretty much only respond by phone calls or virtual. And nationally, it has changed incredibly. Oh my goodness, we used to always be able to send people to that disaster area. And now it's almost all primarily done virtually because it wasn't safe. It's not safe to send people on planes and to, have people having to stay in shelter areas. And people don't always feel that comfortable doing that, but they still wanted to assist the Red Cross continue to do the good work that they did. So, wow, a majority of it now is done virtually.
So you just opened another line of questioning with regard to responding to disasters larger than home fires and farther away,
Mm-hmm.
hurricanes, wildfires, floods. Have you deployed to other areas of the country to do so in person?
I have, and that was a individual choice that I made. I individually, chose to say I'm comfortable enough, traveling. So I just recently was out in California with the wildfires. I actually went out to, it was called the Caldor Fire. I flew out I think it was like August 27th. I was there for about 2 weeks then into September. And so that experience was incredible. Is this a good time? Can I tell you a little bit about it?
Yeah, I wish you would. Sure.
Okay, great. So I initially flew out into Sacramento and I was assigned to a shelter because the wildfires are something you can't even imagine how quickly they spread. And the destruction of a wildfire is like nothing I had ever experienced before. In a house fire, typically typically, you know, the fire department can get there quick enough that something is saved, you know. Not always. Sometimes the entire structure burns, but oftentimes there's at least something left, part of the structure, or people can get back into the house when it's safe and get maybe some of their belongings, or some things you can get out or try to get cleaned. But in a wildfire, they travel so quickly. The intensity of the heat is so high that nothing is left. And the pictures sometimes that we see just don't do justice to standing there. And there is, when I tell you there is nothing left except maybe like the stone fireplace, if the person had a fireplace, metal burns, and it's amazing to see, like, there's nothing. And it is heartbreaking, I have to tell you. And I've had the opportunity to be with individuals who, when, you know, it was clear and they were able to go back to see if anything was left of their home, they take like these sifters, and you're sifting through ash looking for anything, like, did anything survive? And it's heartbreaking because people often, they don't care about furniture, they don't care about anything like that, but they do care about things from their family heirlooms. They're looking for their grandmother's ring, they're looking for anything, and they know right where it should be in that pile of ash that was once a bedroom where their dresser was, and they're sifting, just hoping to be able to find something, and it's not there. Everything burns. So it's incredible.
How do you help these people?
Oh my goodness. At that point, you're just there with them. You're just there with them, to hug them, to just support them, to just be there.
I
Because
suppose listening to them is important.
exactly. So, but this last time when I went out to California, let me get back to that.
Sure.
I was assigned to shelters this time. And so I started out in a small shelter where some people had been staying for about a week, and some people had lost their homes, but the majority didn't know if their home was standing or not. They didn't know. So I started out there a couple days, talking with people, listening to people, providing for whatever their immediate needs were. And very quickly, it was actually 2 days, I got a call from my lead supervisor out there who said, Adrienne, we need to move you to South Lake Tahoe. Fires have shifted. The fires are heading for the town. They're evacuating everyone out of South Lake Tahoe, and we're putting them in shelters. So yeah, we're moving you. Can you go get your luggage, and can you start driving to South Lake Tahoe? It was about a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive. So yeah, absolutely. So you never unpack with the Red Cross, by the way. So I grabbed my luggage. Anyway, got down there to a place called Gardnerville. It was a shelter of about 300 people, I think. They had gotten there, many of them the night before. I very quickly met this woman named Mary. She actually was sitting in like where a cafeteria was set up with food. She is an older gal. I put her in her 80s, like early 80s. She was in a wheelchair, and she clearly was in shock. And Red Cross workers had already, brought her blankets. She had a blanket. She had water. Somebody had brought her some food. They already had really attended to her needs. So I saw her right away. So I went over to her pretty quickly and started talking to her. And so one of the things I do as a mental health person is I encourage people to tell their stories. I want them talking about, giving a voice to their trauma. And she proceeded to tell me how at 2:30 in the morning, she still lived in her own home. She had like healthcare people that would come in and assist her during the day, but she still lived in her own home. So at 2:30 in the morning, there was a banging, she said, on the door. It was the fire department. They were saying, you have to go now. Like, you have to go now. We've got like school buses out here. We can help you get on the bus. The fire has shifted. It's not safe. You have to go. She grabbed her purse. She didn't really know what else to grab. She was frightened. They put her on a school bus. They brought her to this big community center, the Gardnerville, I think, Community Center. And, and kind of dropped her off and went back to get more people. So she started telling me her story. She started telling me what happened and how scared she was and how confused she was and how frightened she was. She started saying to me, my son doesn't know where I am. He'll be so upset. He'll be so scared. I don't know how to get a hold of him. I need to try to reach him. Do you know how I can reach him? And I said, yes. And by the way, that's one of the things that the Red Cross does. We have, I don't know if it's a policy, it's a practice. It's called getting to yes. And what that means is you do whatever you need to do to help people and say yes and provide them with what they need. So of course I said to her, yes. I said, we'll use my phone. So I got out my cell phone. She knew his number. I was able to call him right away, hand her the phone. Of course, I stepped away so she could talk with him, let him know where she was, that she was okay. And then she handed the phone to me so I could give him a little bit more information about exactly where she was. She immediately was relieved. She immediately started crying. And then she said to me, will you pray with me? And I said, yes. So I prayed with her, and then she asked me, I asked her rather, I said, we do have spiritual care people here in the Red Cross that are pastors and ministers and priests. And, would you like to talk with one of our spiritual care people? And she said, oh, yes, please. And so I said, I can do that. I can take care of that for you. We talked a little bit more. I found out she had specific dietary needs. Like she couldn't eat that food as good as it looked. And she often needed like those boosts or ensures. And I said, yes, we can take care of that. I will talk to some of our dietary folks, our folks in the kitchen. We can get those for you. Yes, we can do that. So just proceeded to, spend time with her. Another one of the shelter workers, who are incredible people, was kind of close by. And, I said, can you come over and, can you just sit with Mary for a little while? And she said, yes, came right over, pulled up a chair. And then that freed me up to be able to go, find our spiritual care person, talk to the folks in the kitchen, do those things to meet her needs, and then move on to the next person in the shelter that needed help.
And for 2 weeks you did this. That's a long time to be coping with people who have gone through the darkest hours of their lives.
Oh, it's incredible. And we work 12-hour shifts. We were working 12-hour shifts.
So I suppose the people,
you know that going out though.
Sure. And you're going to be there for at least 2 weeks. That's kind of the norm.
Yep.
But I would imagine that you and other mental health workers could also use a little help every now and then.
So I'm always impressed by the leadership team of mental health. I say that frequently, and I mean it when I say it. Again, they don't pay me. I'm not paid by the Red Cross. I'm a volunteer. I don't get any money, of course. I volunteer my time. I go out there. The leadership teams are strong. I had a strong mental health team when I was out there. There was another mental health person in that shelter with me. And then, by the way, so those folks could only stay in that shelter. We were there for 3 days. And on the third day, we had to move everyone out of that shelter because the winds had shifted again. The fire was getting too close to the shelter. The ash was falling from the sky. And folks here in Northeast or Northern Ohio, we know like when those beautiful snowflakes fall just so softly down and they kind of join together so they're a little bigger and they fall. That's what was happening out there at the shelter. When I would go out to get in my car, the ash was coming down like that, and I had to put on windshield wipers to clear the ash off of the car when I was leaving. So we moved that entire shelter and 2 other shelters then to Reno, Nevada, which was about another hour like north of there, safer location, to a really large convention center, literally in downtown Reno. We had to move those people again because the fire had once again shifted. So, but back to our leadership team, when I got to the bigger shelter, then there were a team of, I want to say 6 of us then. And so, you know, we were still working long days, but there was other mental health folks to be able to talk with. They require, people to take a day off when you're working those 2-week shifts. So you have to. My supervisor out there just signed me up. You're taking a day off, Adrienne. You've been here a long time already. You're working hard. So
It sounds like a lot of work, Adrienne. And what would you say to motivate someone who may be a licensed professional and watching this or listening to this today? What would you say to encourage them to volunteer for the Red Cross? What would their motivation be?
I would tell them that they're already in a profession where they help people. And so when you're helping people, it never feels like work. And yes, it might sound like, oh, long days. Oh my gosh, that's so much work. I have never thought of it as work. It never feels like work to me. It is always a privilege for me because I have an opportunity to help people at their very most vulnerable time in their lives, one of their most vulnerable times. And what a privilege and honor really that is, to be able to be there, to sit with them, to listen to them, to encourage them to tell that story, to provide education to them about all those feelings they're feeling are normal. And that confusion in their head, how they can't think clearly, is normal. And it doesn't feel like work at all, ever. And that's why I go back and I do it again. And that's why all the volunteers in the Red Cross go back. Like, oh my goodness, my first deployment was in 2014. I've probably done, I lost track, 15, maybe 16. I tend to do about 2 a year, 2 or 3 a year. I don't do them all the time. So, I mean, I come back home to my own, my own family and my own life, but it is a rewarding, like anything, you think you're going there to help and give, and you get so much back, and that ability to pay it forward is a privilege. It's a privilege.
Well, we know that disasters aren't going away. In fact, they've been increasing year after year. And the need for volunteers like you, who are licensed mental health professionals, is going to increase as well.
Yes.
So for people who may have it in their hearts to help people as you do, Adrienne, they can visit redcross.org/volunteer and look at the volunteer opportunities that are available, and perhaps begin the application process. There is some training involved, even though you have your professional licensure. There's some Red Cross things you need to know.
Right.
But it doesn't take long, does it?
It doesn't. And it's all online.
Right.
You can do it fairly quickly.
Yeah. And the difference you can make in other people's lives is, as you've been describing, indescribable.
It is. And I would tell people, really, like, give it a try, like, just do it. It is hard to describe, but I'm betting you'll come back. You'll keep doing it once you try.
Right. We'll take you up on that bet. We hope that others will too. And we'll visit redcross.org/volunteer or call 1-800-RED-CROSS. Adrienne, thank you so much for everything you do for the Red Cross and the people we serve. Thank you.
You're welcome. So nice to be able to spend some time talking about it. So thank you for this opportunity.
Adrienne Kapr-Ford, a disaster mental health volunteer, a supervisor for the American Red Cross of Northern Ohio, has been our guest. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.